Okay, I'm Hap Griffin, and I'm an astrophotographer, and this is my observatory. The observatory is something called a roll-off roof observatory. It's a building where all of the equipment that I use for astrophotography and just in general looking at stars and things in the sky are permanently set up and aligned so that I don't have to go through all of that every time I come here. I can just roll the roof back to expose the sky, turn things on, and I'm ready to go. Well, I've always been interested in astronomy. Matter of fact, my grandmother, I think I told you before, said that my first word was moon, so I've always been looking at the stars. Back in the 90s, I really got interested in photographing the stars, and so it evolved from there, trying to photograph setting up out in the field at different observing events. And I quickly realized that it was just too much work and too much detail and tedium to set up all this equipment every time I wanted to photograph something. And I wanted some place where I could leave the equipment aligned and set up and just come in and turn it on and be ready to start shooting. So that's the purpose of the observatory here. And other friends had the same idea, and so we've built a complex up here where we actually have 5 of these buildings in one spot now. This is my photographic telescope. The big one is a long focal length telescope. It's 12.5 inches in diameter. The smaller one on the other side that you may not be able to see is 4 inches in diameter, and it's for photographing objects that are larger in the sky and don't need as much focal length. But these are photographic telescopes specially made for photography. And these back here, these are the special astronomical cameras. They don't look anything like a regular camera, but they're specially built for what I'm doing here. Okay, we don't just snap pictures here. The objects that we're looking at are exceedingly dim. They're just on this side of black, is what I like to say. Some of the galaxies that we're shooting are millions of light years distant, and so the light is very, very dim. It's come so far. And so we have to soak up photons for a period of time. Your eyes work in real time. As soon as you see something that's registered, and that's that, whereas, and that limits how dim of an object you can see. When we use a camera attached to a telescope and we can leave the camera open for minutes or hours, we can really soak up a lot of light and see things that are unseeable otherwise. And so we work with long time exposures, and we actually stack a number of those to bring up detail out of the noise. And it works out to be where we're able to see things that a single shot could not see. Okay, this is called a polar mount, or a German equatorial mount, and it looks funny, but that's because it has to rotate around an axis that is exactly parallel with the Earth's axis. And as a matter of fact, this is the axis that it rotates through right here. And that's exactly parallel with the Earth's axis. This angle right here above the horizon is what our latitude is. It's exactly about 34 degrees from this location. And this turns during the night and follows the Earth's rotation so that the stars in the camera are perfectly still. We don't have football-shaped stars. We wind up with perfectly circular-shaped stars. I like the deep sky objects, things like galaxies, various nebula where clouds of gas and dust where stars are forming. I don't really have the equipment to do planetary photography. Some of the other people here on this site do, and they do excellent versions of photographs of like Jupiter and Saturn and Mars and the other planets, but which is strange because they're a lot closer, but they're also a lot smaller. So I'm taking pictures of much, much larger objects at a much larger distance, and my equipment is specifically designed for that. I like I said, nebula and galaxies is my main targets. If you've been living under a rock, we just had a total solar eclipse come right through South Carolina. And that is where the alignment between the sun and the moon is perfect, to where the moon blocks the light of the sun for a short period of time. And where I was, it was near Greenville, it was about 2.5 minutes. In Sumter, where I live, it was about 1.5 minutes. But during that time, the sky got dark. You could see the sun's atmosphere that you can never see any other time because of the glare of the sun. And you could actually see stars and planets come out. It got that dark. And so it was a phenomenal event that I've seen it once before back in 1973. And I really want to see more in my time. And the next one that we'll be able to see in the United States is in 2024, 7 years from now, out in the Midwest. And so I plan to travel to that one. I had some friends from the observatory complex here. We met up near where one of the guys works in a little town called Williamston, South Carolina, which was almost right on the middle of the eclipse path. And I took a small tracking mount. The Earth is turning, so I didn't want to have to keep adjusting my camera, like you would have to if it was just on a tripod. So I set up the camera to track the sun. And I set up automation with a laptop computer to actually run the camera on a predetermined script, so that I didn't have to be spending the time during the critical darkness time where I wanted to be looking at the eclipse, playing with a camera and settings. Everything was predetermined and it ran by automation. I was really fortunate to have my 3 grandkids there, and they loved it. And that's what really made it for me, was exposing them to something like that I hope that they'll always remember. I was successful in getting some pretty good pictures of the corona of the sun, which you can't see any other time except during a total solar eclipse. Got some good pictures of the partial phases. The sun, fortunately, had some sunspots on it, so it had some detail to see. Over the last year or so, it's been almost smooth with no sunspots. These are solar storms on the surface of the sun, and it turns out that lo and behold, we had some activity on the sun for the eclipse, so that gave us something a little extra to see and photograph. And just before totality, I got to shoot what's called a diamond ring, where the last little bit of light is coming through the mountains and the valleys of the moon. And then just after totality, before the moon moves off the surface, you see another diamond ring on the other side. And I was able to also photograph some of what's called solar prominences. These are flares, huge flares that are some 30 or 40,000 miles tall, that are leaping up from the surface of the sun. And I got some good photographs of that as well. Processing eclipse photography is a specialized art, because you have such a high range of brightness levels. As a matter of fact, one of the things I was shooting for, when the moon gets in front of the sun during totality, it looks like a completely black disk. But in fact, it is actually lit by something called earthshine. There's sunlight reflecting off of the Pacific Ocean that shines back onto the surface of the moon. And if you can take a long exposure and do some special processing, you can actually see craters and details on the surface of the moon that to your eyes appears to be black. And I was able to photograph the earthshine this time around, so that was pretty cool. My wife watched it from my backyard deck. She was on call for her work at the hospital, so she couldn't leave town. But she laid out in a chair and watched it, and she said that she did not know what to expect, and that it was more than everything I had told her about. So she really, really enjoyed it. Like I say, my kids both, one of my kids, my son was there with me, and my 3 grandkids were there, and my 6-year-old grandson said that was just the coolest thing he'd ever seen. So I hope he remembers that. As for, I heard a lot of reports from Sumter that people were sweating the clouds. The clouds were moving in and out, but when the time came for totality, most people saw it just fine. Well, the next total solar eclipse we're going to see in the United States is in, I believe, April of 2024. Go to the website www.greatamericaneclipse.com and you'll see maps. You'll see an interactive map of the path of that 2024 eclipse. It starts down in Mexico, comes up through Texas, kind of follows the Mississippi River for a little while, and then goes out up in New England. So from here in South Carolina, really only be about a day's drive to maybe western Tennessee or a little bit into Missouri. It'd be a long day's drive, but I'm certainly going to make it. And my wife was so impressed with this one, she said she was coming with me this time. So I think we got a bunch of them. I don't know of anybody who saw this eclipse this past week who doesn't want to go see another one. It really was that cool.